The night air was cold and sharp, but the great hall of the Ashworth Pack burned with warmth and light. Torches lined the stone walls, and the scent of roasted meat and fresh flowers filled every corner. Tonight, Alpha King Draven Ashworth would present his chosen bride to the pack, and everyone had gathered to witness it. Draven stood tall at the front of the hall, his broad shoulders draped in a dark cloak trimmed with silver, the mark of his royal bloodline. Beside him stood Seraphine, elegant and graceful, her golden hair falling in soft waves over a gown the color of moonlight. She smiled at the crowd, and the crowd smiled back, charmed by her beauty and the promise she carried. Her family ruled a neighboring territory, and this marriage meant peace between two lands that had fought for generations. The pack elders raised their cups in celebration. Somewhere near the back of the hall, half hidden by shadow, stood a young woman named Wren. She was an Omega, the lowest rank among wolves, and she had not been invited so much as tolerated. Months ago, Draven had rejected her in front of the entire pack, calling her too weak, too plain, too ordinary to stand beside a king. The words still lived inside her, quiet but never forgotten. She had built a small life since then, working in the healer's den, keeping to herself, trying not to feel the ache that came whenever she caught his scent on the wind. Wren told herself she was here tonight only because attendance was expected of every pack member. She was not here to watch him. She was not here to feel anything at all. But then something strange happened. As Seraphine turned to greet an elder, her scent drifted across the hall, carried by the draft from an open window. Wren's senses, sharper than most gave her credit for, caught something beneath the floral perfume Seraphine wore. It was faint, almost buried, but unmistakable to a trained nose. It was the scent of another pack, not a friendly one. It was the scent of the Blackthorn wolves, the very pack that had waged war against the Ashworths for 3 long years before an uneasy truce was struck. Wren's heart began to pound. She told herself she was imagining it, that grief and old wounds were playing tricks on her mind. But the scent lingered every time Seraphine moved, faint but constant, like a shadow that refused to leave. She needed to be certain before she said anything. A rejected Omega, accusing the king's bride of treachery, would need more than a feeling, it would need proof. The celebration stretched late into the night, and Wren watched from her corner, memorizing the way Seraphine's eyes moved across the room, cataloging every small detail. She noticed how Seraphine's gaze lingered too long on the eastern doors, the ones that led toward the forest boundary. She noticed how Seraphine excused herself twice during the feast, gone for several minutes each time, returning with her composure just slightly disturbed. When the celebration finally ended and the hall began to empty, Wren slipped out into the cold night and followed the direction Seraphine had gone earlier. She moved quietly through the trees, her bare feet silent on the frozen ground, years of being overlooked having taught her how to move unseen. She found Seraphine standing in a small clearing near the border, speaking in hushed tones to a tall wolf, shifted halfway into human form, his eyes glowing amber in the darkness. Wren crouched low behind a fallen log, her breath caught in her throat. "The wedding will weaken their guard," Seraphine was saying, her voice cold and businesslike, so unlike the warm, charming tone she used inside the hall. "Everyone will be distracted. That is when your forces move." The Blackthorn wolf nodded. "And the king?" "Leave him to me," Seraphine said. "By the time he realizes what has happened, it will be too late to stop it." Wren's whole body went cold. She had been right. Seraphine was not here to bring peace. She was here to destroy the pack from within, using her marriage to Draven as the perfect disguise. Wren waited until the two figures parted ways before she crept back toward the pack territory, her mind racing. She needed to tell someone. She needed to warn Draven. The next morning, she went straight to the Beta, a stern wolf named Corwin, who had never had much patience for Omegas speaking out of turn. "I saw Seraphine meeting with a Blackthorn wolf last night," Wren said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "She is planning something against the pack. I heard her say the wedding would be used to weaken our guard." Corwin studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a short, humorless laugh. "You expect me to believe that the king's chosen bride, the daughter of an allied territory, is secretly working with our enemies? based on what you claim to have seen in the dark, alone, in the forest. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. You were rejected by the king, Corwin said, his tone sharpening. It is not difficult to understand why you might want to see his happiness fall apart. Go back to the healer's den, Ren. Leave matters of the pack to those who matter. Ren left his chambers with her cheeks burning, humiliation twisting alongside her fear. She had expected disbelief, but the accusation that she was acting out of bitterness cut deeper than she wanted to admit. Still, she could not let it go. Too much was at stake. She decided to try one more time, this time going directly to Draven himself. She found him in the training yard the following afternoon, sparring with one of his warriors. When he noticed her standing at the edge of the field, his expression flickered with something unreadable, before settling into cool distance. "Ren," he said, lowering his blade. "This is unexpected." "I need to speak with you," she said. "It's important." He studied her for a moment, then nodded to his sparring partner to step aside. "Say what you came to say." Ren took a breath and told him everything. The scent she had caught at the celebration, the conversation she had overheard in the forest, the threat against the pack hidden inside the very marriage meant to protect it. Draven's jaw tightened as she spoke, and by the end, his eyes had turned hard and distant. "You are telling me that Seraphine, a woman I have known for months, the daughter of an allied alpha, is secretly working with the very pack that killed my father?" "I know how it sounds," Ren said, "but I would not come to you with this if I were not certain." "Certain," Draven repeated, his voice low. "You were certain I was wrong to reject you too, weren't you? And yet here we are." The words struck like a blow, but Ren refused to look away. "This has nothing to do with what happened between us. This is about the safety of the pack. I am telling you what I saw with my own eyes, what I heard with my own ears. Believe me or not, but do not dismiss it without looking into it yourself." For a long moment, Draven said nothing. Something in his eyes shifted, a flicker of doubt breaking through his pride. He had known Ren long before the rejection, had known her honesty, her steadiness, the way she never exaggerated or sought attention. It was, in fact, part of what had once drawn him to her, before politics and pressure from the elders had convinced him she was not queen material. "I will consider what you have said," he finally replied. "But I need more than words, Ren. If you have proof, bring it to me. Otherwise, I cannot act against Seraphine based on suspicion alone. Too much depends on this alliance." It was not the full belief she had hoped for, but it was something. Ren nodded and left the training yard, determined to find the proof he needed before it was too late. That night, she returned to the forest, hoping to catch another exchange between Seraphine and the Blackthorn wolf. Instead, she found something even more damning, a folded letter, dropped carelessly near the clearing, written in a hurried hand. It detailed the timing of the wedding ceremony and marked the weakest points along the pack's border, exactly where an attack would do the most damage. Ren's hands trembled as she read it. This was proof, real, undeniable proof. She rushed back toward the packlands, the letter clutched tightly against her chest, her mind already forming the words she would say to Draven. But as she crossed into the territory, a horn sounded in the distance, sharp and urgent, the pack's warning call. Her stomach dropped. She was too late. Ren ran toward the sound, her heart hammering, and arrived at the edge of the pack grounds just as chaos broke loose. Enemy wolves poured through a break in the eastern boundary, exactly where the letter had marked the weakest point. Screams and snarls filled the air as warriors scrambled to respond to an attack they had not prepared for. In the center of it all stood Seraphine, no longer smiling, no longer playing the gentle bride. Her true nature had surfaced, cold and calculating, as she directed the invading wolves with practiced precision. Draven emerged from the main hall, shifting mid-stride into his wolf form, a massive dark shape charging toward the breach. Ren watched in horror as a Blackthorn wolf lunged at him from the side, an angle he could not see in the chaos of battle. Without thinking, Ren ran forward and shifted, her smaller form moving with a speed and agility that surprised even her. She collided with the attacking wolf just before its jaws could close on Draven, knocking it off balance long enough for him to recover and strike back. The battle raged for what felt like hours, though it was likely only minutes. Warriors fought alongside each other, driven by instinct and loyalty, while Ren stayed close to Draven's side, using every skill she had learned in the healer's den, and every ounce of courage she possessed, to protect him and the pack she still loved despite everything. Slowly, the tide turned. With their surprise advantage lost and their plan exposed, the Blackthorn wolves began to retreat, dragging their wounded with them into the forest. Seraphine tried to flee amid the confusion, but she was caught by two of Draven's warriors before she could escape the grounds. When the dust finally settled, the pack gathered in the courtyard, bloodied but victorious. Seraphine stood before them, stripped of her false gentleness, her true colors laid bare for everyone to see. The letter Ren had found was presented as undeniable evidence, along with the testimony of warriors who had heard her directing the attack. Draven stood before his pack, his expression heavy with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I was blind," he said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. "I let politics and pride cloud my judgment, and it nearly cost us everything." He turned to face Seraphine. "You will be exiled from this territory, and stripped of any claim to alliance with this pack. You are fortunate that mercy still has a place in these lands." Seraphine was led away, her composure finally breaking into desperate protests that no one cared to hear. The pack watched her go, and slowly, the tension in the courtyard began to ease. Draven turned then, searching the crowd until his eyes found Ren, standing quietly near the edge of the gathering, exhausted and bruised from the battle, but still standing tall. He walked toward her, and the pack parted to let him pass. When he reached her, he did not speak immediately. Instead, he simply looked at her, really looked at her, as though seeing her clearly for the first time in months. "You tried to warn me," he said finally, "more than once. I dismissed you because I let my pride get in the way of the truth. I was wrong, Ren, about all of it." Ren felt something loosen in her chest, a tightness she had carried since the day he rejected her. "I only wanted to protect the pack," she said softly. "That has never changed, no matter how you saw me." "I see you now," Draven said, his voice quieter, meant only for her. "I should have seen you all along." The pack watched in hushed silence as their king knelt before the Omega he had once cast aside, offering not a command, not an order, but an honest apology and an open hand. Ren hesitated only a moment before reaching out and taking it. In the days that followed, whispers of Ren's courage spread through the pack. She was no longer the rejected Omega hiding in the shadows. She had seen the truth when no one else would, and she had fought to protect a pack that had once turned its back on her. Slowly, the pack's view of her began to shift, respect replacing dismissal, gratitude replacing indifference. Draven made no grand announcements, no rushed proposals meant to fix his earlier mistake. Instead, he simply began spending time with her again, this time without the weight of politics or expectation between them, only two wolves rediscovering something that had never truly disappeared. Weeks later, standing together on the same balcony where he had once presented Seraphine to the pack, Draven turned to Ren beneath a quiet evening sky. "I do not want a queen chosen for alliances or appearances," he said. "I want a partner who sees the truth, even when no one else will, who stands by this pack, no matter the cost. I already know who that is." Ren looked out over the packlands, the home she had nearly lost, the home she had fought to save even when no one believed her. She thought of all the nights she had spent alone, certain her voice would never matter, and how far she had come since then. "I am not asking for a crown," she said quietly. "I only ever wanted to be seen." "Then let the pack see you," Draven said. "Not as the Omega I once rejected, but as the wolf who saved us all." Under the darkening sky, surrounded by the pack she had protected, and the king, who had finally opened his eyes to the truth, Ren allowed herself, for the first time in a long while, to believe in a future built not on politics or pride, but on honesty, courage, and a bond that had been there all along, waiting patiently to be recognized.